Our perspective as investors for 12 years, we basically have gone around the world trying to understand why governments and how governments have really transitioned from being in a turmoil state to a success state. That's been our work for 5 years. And what we've concluded, which is the title of my speech, if it gets up here, is how Greece can win the trust and confidence of taxpayers in the global capital markets. That's our view. And the key words for us are trust and confidence. That's where it starts, and it starts with that for both taxpayers and the global capital markets. My CV is we've been for the last 5 years or so doing presentations on this. As a consequence, I've been appointed sole special advisor to a European task force on managing government balance sheets. I'm now a visiting professor at Ischite in Lisboa on government financial management. I've received the William Pitt Younger Award in the UK for government financial management. So my background was turning around companies, but in the last 5 years, our expertise has been going to governments. 2 facts, that's all we're talking about today in 10 minutes, is 2 facts. Fact number 1, which is undeniable, is that despite political claims, and we're not politicians here, so we're not seeking political consensus, we're seeking this from a professional, technical point of view, is that despite political claims to the contrary, the debt to GDP ratio for Greece is universally recognized as the single most important measure of government sustainability. What you've seen evolving over the past several years is this evolution to other metrics, sustainability, complexity. No question, it's still debt to GDP. You'll hear 180%, you'll hear debt mountain. That's all you hear, repeated, repeated, repeated. Number 2, this is the tougher conclusion, is that the political actors are overstating the Greece government debt by ignoring internationally agreed upon accounting and internationally agreed upon statistic standards, which require that debt being reported reflects a true and fair view of economic reality. And that's the important one, and that's what we're going to talk about in our minutes, is that they are overstating the debt number by ignoring the international standards for accounting and the internationally agreed upon statistics standards. Now, once we prove this, which we will clearly do, and we've done it in multiple presentations, as sure as I'm standing here today, what you will hear is they'll go back to number 1 and they'll say, well, the debt number really doesn't matter. It's other things. So just remember when speakers come after me, all right? What you're going to hear is that, well, okay, so maybe the debt number's wrong, but it doesn't matter anyways. So remember the beginning of the conversation, and remember the newspapers tomorrow, remember the rating agencies. If you look at the rating agencies, like their entire reports, maybe 36 pages, but the focus is on debt to GDP. So 1, debt to GDP is universally recognized. For those who don't understand the IMF, by the way, even though the IMF says they don't use the number, I have water here already, thanks. They use that debt to GDP ratio to project their interest rates. It's not disclosed directly, it is on one of the 2 pages. So when they key what's going to happen to your sustainability in the future, they take this number of debt to GDP and they change the interest rates and their projections based on this meaningless number. And in fact, in the latest paper, they actually projected interest rates, and you can quote me on this, will go as high as 20% for Greece. So when they build their debt sustainability model, if you're going to put 20% interest rates for Greece, what do you think the number's going to look like? It's going to explode. Not in the conversation, in their documents. So debt to GDP is super, super important. They now project 2060 GDP, which Minister Sakaloudis commented is, it's ridiculous. You're lucky if you can get clarity out 24 months. To go 2060 and use the same number, debt to GDP again. The rating agencies, I got a matrix here, I'll show you that. And the media, that's all you're going to hear every day. The IMF is basically using political doublespeak, and I don't mean that in a negative sense. I mean that in a practical sense. It's political. They state on one hand that debt to GDP is not a very meaningful proxy. But then they go ahead and use the same number for their projections and the debt sustainability analysis. It's inherently inconsistent. It's political doublespeak. They use it for GFN. If they would apply the same math to France, Italy, or Spain, their debt would be explosive as well. Just fair. 2060 projections, very, very quickly, and I have to move fast here, is in 2014, they were saying it was going to be 60. Now it's 275. 24 months. Obviously, they have no idea. This is all the rating agencies. We have the backup. You have the reports. You can look at the numbers there. Number two, which is the important one, there are international standards. What you're also going to hear, I said one thing is you're going to hear people say after I speak, well, we don't really use the number. The next thing you're going to hear is, sure as I am here, is they're going to completely ignore that there are international standards. Completely, totally, absolutely ignore it. It's as if they don't exist. They do exist. There are international accounting standards, which are IPSIS and IFRS, which are used throughout the world by all the leading governments. They do exist. They've been agreed upon. And there are internationally statistic standards that have been agreed upon. There are international standards. Political actors like to make up their own numbers. Future value of debt is a number that is made up. IPSIS best practices around the world, New Zealand, UK, exist. IFRS, every company in the world uses. SNA has been agreed to by the European Commission, the IMF, the World Bank, the UN, the OECD. They say it should be adopted as soon as possible, and they say it must reflect economic reality. Totally ignored, as if they don't exist. They do exist, and they've agreed to them. The European System of Accounts, which was passed by law in the Parliament, says the same thing. True and fair economic reality. They support SNA. Maastricht is a misleading, it never intended to be used as a number. It's a future value of debt. It was before international accounting, it was before ESA, it was before SNA. It has absolutely no meaning, and it's continuing to be used. Here are the numbers when you calculate correctly. How am I for time? Just so I know, 5 minutes?
It's a bit less than that. It's about 3.
But I had no slides for a few minutes.
I've accounted for that.
Oh, you have, okay.
We're down to 31 seconds, so I've given you an extra few.
All right, so the real number, the number they talk about, which is future value, they say is 316 or 180, okay? That is not the international standards. It's not. International standards come in at 132 or 75%. That's economic reality. A future value of debt number, when you've had 6 restructurings to your debt, it no longer has any meaning to it at all. Using the statistic standards or the European standards when correctly calculated, a little different, but still half of the number. This is economic reality. That is not economic reality. And if you're going to talk to your taxpayers in the capital markets, you should use a number that reflects economic reality. Now, here's a slide that's a little small, but I think will help everybody really understand what's happened here and why Greece is different. And if you could appreciate, just take a look at this one slide, because I don't think it's in your deck. We did it based on a suggestion yesterday, okay? Greece started with a future face value of the 316. Over here, you've had 6 successive restructurings. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on the end. Each one of these changed the composition of the debt. You start with the debt, but as you extend the maturities, you reduce the interest rates, defer the interest rates. This economic model, which is future face value, loses its meaning in order to reflect economic reality. Example, if you were to take your debt and say you don't have to pay it back for 1,000 years, it's 0% interest. Is that debt still the same number when you were paying 7% and it was due in a year? Of course not. But no, under the Maastricht Treaty, they could extend Greece's debt out to 1,000 years, with 0 interest, and the debt number would not change. It's a meaningless, totally meaningless number. It violates every international standard there is by the UN's and the IMF's own numbers, by the way. Just to go back, if the IMF, and this is an important point, if the IMF used their own methodology correctly, which is in their DSA protocol, the debt number would come in at 116 or 204, not 316. So politically, if they want to use the number, they can. But factually and technically, if they use the numbers, and they're educated to use the numbers publicly, you will get a very different number because of the 6 restructurings. This is on page 18. Take a look at it. That's a very important point. I can give you that. This is on the internet. Here's the comparison for countries. Greece has a huge competitive advantage. Calculate the number correctly. You've had 6 restructurings. Others have not had the 6 restructurings. When you modify the terms of the debt under statistics accounting, the debt is extinguished, logically, and replaced at the new value with the new terms. And there are rules, comprehensive rules. Again, point number 2, the others who get up here will say, well, they'll just ignore it. They'll pretend the rules don't exist. They do exist, and they've signed them. So you're going to hear either the number's meaningless, or they'll just completely ignore them if they don't exist. They do exist. This is backup, debt relief. The current government, by the way, has received $46 billion of debt relief. A huge, massive success for the government, but not repeated a single word. Maturities extended, interest rates reduced, but they didn't use the standards to calculate the debt. It's one of the biggest successes in history. It's not even discussed. Surprisingly, you know, maybe yes, okay? It's the sole responsibility of, obviously, the government of the sovereign nation. And this is the debt example. My last slide I want to go through is this one here. Continuing to ask for debt relief, you're perpetuating your own economic malaise. Because not using the international standards, you're telling people your debt's unsustainable, I need clarity. Why don't you calculate the number correctly? That's a first damn good step. There are international standards that the best governments use, international standards mandated by the IMF, the UN, the EC. Use the standards to defend the country and perpetuate the economic growth. The win is there. It comes back down to trust and confidence, not political fiction. The number that's currently being used now is political fiction, which is what generates trust, distrust, and lack of confidence, which we've seen in many countries. What you want is the trust and confidence, and it starts by adhering to the internationally agreed upon rules so you can get rid of the economic malaise, and it has to be trust and confidence. And to get the trust and confidence, ditch the political fiction, which is clearly destructive, and take the international standards and defend the country.